Hello and welcome back to the Motorsport Better podcast. I'm your host DD, and joining me today once again is my friend and your co-host Vedant. On this episode, we'll be reviewing the F1 season opener at Bahrain. So let's grab some chai, take our seats, ready our opinions, and dive right into the conversation. Hello Vedant. It has finally happened. We had been, at least I had been
Yeah.
hedging my expectations, but Ferrari is back with a bang. And oh my god, you should have seen me punching the air after the race on Sunday. I was ecstatic. I think, I was celebrating just as much as any of the folks down at the Ferrari garage and the drivers on track on Sunday. How was your experience to see the Ferrari back on the podium, at the top step on the podium?
Well, to be honest, entire last night and today, I was just thinking about things to say as my opening line. Thinking about a catchphrase to say as my opening line, but nothing does justice to what we just witnessed yesterday. It was pure bliss, and I was speechless to say the least.
Yeah, don't be surprised if you finally see some Ferrari bias on this podcast. But anyway, I think of the three things that we want to talk about today. Obviously, we're trying this new format where we want to talk about the three big storylines broadly that take place during the weekend. And I think the first storyline, is not that Ferrari are back. Obviously, but I think the biggest story there is Mattia Binotto has finally embarked on his on his road of redemption. He came in at a bad time when Ferrari got caught in the engine saga. And they were down on power. They had a terrible 2020 season. Rebuilt the team for 2021. There was hopes, but we didn't think they'd be at the front of the pack. But I think I won't say Mattia Binotto has redeemed himself yet, because we know that Ferrari has operational issues. We've seen in the past throughout the time they had with Seb. But I think this is a step in the right direction. And if Mattia Binotto can take the Tifosi to a constructors title at the very least, he will have redeemed himself at the end of the year.
Yeah, first of all, Mattia Binotto does not have to redeem himself. The mistakes Ferrari made were not on him. His basically his job since day one was to get Ferrari back to the top. His never the Ferrari downfall was never on him in a way, but yes, I think Mattia Binotto has finally struck that that final nail in the Ferrari master plan as such. They were building towards this new regulations for ages, and last year they were very confident about these new regulations and about their development. But obviously, each team is equally confident in their own programs, but on track against the other teams, it is a whole different ball game. So now that we know the performance, we can easily say that Ferrari are back.
Yep, they're back, but it's not going to be easy because Red Bull are right up there too. Almost if you look at the data from the weekend, it almost seems that Red Bull have the edge on pure pace. Obviously, Max Verstappen couldn't pull it together in qualifying, but it is the drivability of the Ferrari car. The low end torque that people have been talking about, that it's quicker out of the corners, that really helped Charles Leclerc, in those battles with Max Verstappen. But you have to give to Charles what surgical performance, I want to say. He came out after the race, and in the post race interviews, he said that yes, he was braking early to let Max catch him. And there were also rumors that he was not hitting the Ferrari top speed on the front straight, so that Max could catch him and he could keep that battle going until he found some pace within the middle and last sector to pull that gap on Max Verstappen. And that is exactly what he did. And also, I think the most surprising thing for me was that the two didn't come together in turn one over four different opportunities. But also the fact that Charles really had a calm and calculated restart. Max tried to frustrate him by pulling up absolutely right beside him, but Charles was absolutely um, he was not bothered by it. He didn't get frustrated. He just did what he was supposed to do, and he brought the Ferrari home. 3 years after his first chance at winning at Bahrain, finally getting that win. That must feel so good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about that Ferrari talk, that restart, like if you see the restart, Charles Leclerc just short off when Max Verstappen was just beside him at the final corner. So that Ferrari talk you talked about certainly helped him out of that corner as well, and for the restart as well. But as you said, the performance, the driving of Charles Leclerc was absolutely phenomenal. And we watch races for action, we watch races for cars going fast, and there are a million different reasons why people watch Formula One and motorsports. But what goes behind the driver's thinking and how the driver plans an overtake, plans their defense, or plans each and every single move, that is what Charles Leclerc just showed us yesterday. And I mean, we would have just thought that, okay, Max is overtaking him and Charles is overtaking him again. Just a normal overtake and overtake back in two different consecutive straights. But no, Charles Leclerc's planning, and I mean, he later admitted it, and it just goes on to show that there are a million things going on in their brains, and they can still pull off this performance.
Yep, absolutely. Carlos Sainz had a relatively difficult weekend, as he admitted to during the post-race interviews, compared to Charles, and he seems to be a little bit off pace. But last year again, we saw Carlos a bit off the pace, at the start of the season. But throughout the season, we saw Carlos perform better and better, and get on pace with Charles as the season progressed. So I won't be surprised to see Carlos right up there with Charles after 6 to 8 races, and really challenging him for those wins alongside Max Verstappen. But you have to say, I would have imagined that after the restart that Carlos would have had the pace and the opportunity to overtake Verstappen, but that was not the case, and it really took some luck, on Ferrari's part almost to finish with that 1-2. But it also seems that the Ferrari is better on tires also. We didn't hear the Ferrari drivers complain as much as Max did, or Hamilton did on the radio about the tires. So, and that is very good, because that is something that Ferrari struggled with last year a lot, especially at France last year, and that is something they worked on. And it's really good to see Ferrari finally get on top of hopefully all their problems. And I think the bigger picture here is that obviously they've had a great start, but this is just the start of the new regulations, and they have to keep up the pace throughout the next 3 years at the very minimum.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, talking about Carlos is one of the most consistent drivers in Formula One right now. He is on the longest finishing streak in Formula One at the moment, and I think his streak is quite near to the all-time record as well. I can't remember the numbers, but it is true. And talking about, talking in terms of the championship, or in scope of the whole season, Charles Leclerc, we know, is quite aggressive. So you can expect Charles Leclerc to have an incident or two throughout the season. Carlos Sainz is not like that. From what we have seen him, he does not get involved into aggressive incidents. He does not get involved into aggressive driving. So that might play into his hand over the course of the season, but definitely he needs to work on, all the gaps that were there in Bahrain. But yeah,
I mean, you say that, but you have to remember, if Carlos is up there with Charles, there's also Max, and Carlos and Max are also just as explosive as any other driver rivalry. We saw what happened at Toro Rosso. Obviously, it was a long time ago, and Carlos was a different driver. But it's not to say that Carlos does not have the minerals to get into an incident. Almost,
yeah, of course.
if things start to go that way.
Of course.
But yeah, enough about Ferrari. Obviously we can go on about Ferrari and how great it was to see them, and what we expect and things like that. But let's rein it back and let's talk about everything else that happened in the weekend. Obviously, not much to say for Red Bull. I thought it was a decent performance from both Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez. Struggling a little bit on the tires, but unfortunate for them. Obviously it was a spec fuel pump that failed, that brought about both their DNFs. Not the best start for Red Bull's, title defense, but there's not much that they could do about it on track.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's very concerning that it was a spec fuel pump, because it can happen to anybody as such. But obviously, I think the supplier will look into it and make the necessary replacements. But Red Bull has the pace to meet and beat Ferrari at the moment. But a 44-point gap in the constructors championship and a 25-point gap in the drivers championship is
It's just the first race, Vedant.
Yeah.
It's just the first race.
I mean-
you gotta hold it back a little bit.
No.
It's just the
No, no,
first
no.
race. We got 22 more races to go.
I'm not putting Ferrari up ahead in the pecking order as such, but it's still a huge margin. So Red Bull would have to double up, and I mean obviously they have the performance, and the problem was not on their end, so they can be very hopeful of.
Yep.
uh,
And
good
that problem
results.
can strike anyone, anytime,
Yeah,
including Ferrari in the
exactly.
upcoming races. So,
Exactly.
But let's come to the second big storyline from this weekend. We were expecting a somewhat of a shake-up in the order, but not such a big shake-up, I would say. And I think the biggest gainers from this rule overhaul are Haas and Alfa Romeo. Now Haas, it seems like it took some people by surprise. Haas being so good. But I had said last year, regardless of what is going on at Haas, Haas are going to be really good, and don't be surprised. And I put that down to one factor and one factor only, and that was the talent transfer that happened between Ferrari and Haas. And now I think Simon Resta is leading the technical team at Haas, and he's a Ferrari man. He's worked a long time there, which is why I'm not surprised that Haas are so quick. And it's really good to see that team finally free of their PR struggles, almost you could say, and also doing well at the same time. Alfa Romeo took me by surprise a little bit, especially given the fact that they were showing an upward trajectory in the previous era, almost you could say. But after Charles Leclerc left the team, they kind of seemed to go down in terms of performance after that. Once Charles moved on to Ferrari, so I wasn't expecting a whole lot from Alfa, but it seems they have also hit the nail on the head, and it's going to be a great fight in the midfield between the two Ferrari power unit customers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you said, we were all expecting a big shake-up and things like that, but we knew that the top teams will remain at the top, and the bottom teams will just close up and not drastically change positions or whatever. But to see Kevin Magnussen fight Lewis Hamilton on lap 1 was just so mesmerizing.
And Valtteri Bottas starting next to Lewis Hamilton on the grid.
So, I mean, it may both, Alfa Romeo and Haas both are Ferrari customer teams. Haas obviously has a lot of Ferrari technical, a much larger Ferrari technical partnership than Alfa Romeo. But we know that Ferrari have worked hard on this power unit. So there is a lot of, the proportion of the gains of these teams, the Ferrari power unit is a lot, but then again Haas and Alfa Romeo had all the time last year to focus on this year. So
and so did all the other teams, but it's all about where they put the how many eggs they put in each basket, and how they spend the resources.
Yeah, I mean definitely Williams took me by surprise basically in that context.
Yeah, we'll definitely come to that, and we'll definitely come to the power unit chat that you just mentioned. But we also have to say that after what was a terrible testing for both Haas and Alfa Romeo, Haas across the two tests and Alfa Romeo during the first test, it didn't seem like they would do much on track, especially during the first race in Bahrain. But they absolutely killed it, and I feel there is more pace to come from Haas and Alfa Romeo, and I won't be surprised if they trouble Mercedes or maybe George Russell every now and then, because you have to remember Haas and Alfa Romeo haven't had the time to really get on top of their car. Yes, they did well, but that just goes to show how much raw pace that car has. And once they're on top of the setups, they have dialed the car in. I won't be surprised if they're up there with Mercedes, or obviously we're also expecting Mercedes to move up, which will come in a bit. But compared to the performance at the moment, I won't be surprised if they close the gap to Mercedes a lot more than it is right now. And Mercedes might have a larger battle at their hand than they were expecting going into the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Gunter Steiner said that they did not complete a single race distance during testing. So they were not confident enough that both the cars will even finish. Forget points. They will even finish. So to see Kevin Magnussen in P5 and Mick Schumacher just missing out in P11, which was largely due to the contact with Esteban Ocon, it was it is great news for Formula One, for Haas, for these teams, for these drivers, and to see. I mean, Kevin Magnussen, when he signed for Haas, he must have been thinking, okay, I'm just coming back to Formula One. Yeah, I'm just coming back because it's Formula One, not because I have a chance for podiums, basically. But it has
Yeah.
all turned around for Kevin in the best way possible.
Yeah, but it's definitely looking good for both Mick and Guan Yu Zhou, or Zhou Guan Yu, Zhou Guan Yu, a little bit of luck, but I think a decent performance on debut for him to finish in the points. Also, but again, they have to get on pace with their teammates to, help their team score the very crucial championship points throughout the season. And I think, there's a lot to come from both of them. But let's move on to the third, and what might be just as big of a story as Ferrari winning, and that is Mercedes customer teams and Mercedes themselves were the biggest losers at Bahrain in F1, and I think a lot of that has come down to the Mercedes PU. Now, something I think we talked about in our F1 prologues, or we didn't talk about a lot, but we mentioned was the fact that not a lot of people were talking about the change in the fuel that these F1 teams were using, and how people were underestimating the impact that this fuel would have on the performance of the power unit, and it seems that Mercedes has not been able to unlock that performance in their power unit because of this new fuel, whereas Red Bull and Ferrari have been able to make that jump with the new fuel, and have a better power unit overall.
Yeah, I mean, I think the teams themselves could have underestimated that impact, and because the E10 fuels are much different than last year, than whatever it was called last year. I don't know, but yeah, I think the entire geometry of the engines and all the internals, and I think the operational temperature is also widely different from last year. So it's going to be a real struggle for Mercedes and the Mercedes customers if that is entirely the case. We know McLaren have their own struggles. We know Williams and Aston Martin were not even performing in testing. So it may be different things because, but yeah, but I think it's going to be a
Yep.
uphill challenge.
Yeah, the PU doesn't seem to be down on power by a lot, but it just seems to be a little down on power compared to what Ferrari and Red Bull might have. But at the same time, the impression that I got from the conversations we saw, or the interviews we saw of Toto Wolff or other people from the Mercedes team, it seemed like they were expecting more performance from what they saw in the wind tunnel and their simulations and things like that, but they just haven't been able to unlock it. So right now, obviously, I think what aggravated the fact that it seemed like the gap between Ferrari, Red Bull, and Mercedes was so huge was the fact that Mercedes went on to hard tires during their first pit stops. So I think that also made the gap a lot larger than it actually is. I think Mercedes isn't that far behind Ferrari and Red Bull as it seems at the moment, but obviously it will be down to unlocking that aero performance along with hopefully making gains with whatever components they can in the PU that are already not frozen, because we have to remember that most of the PU is already frozen and homologated for the next 3 years. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And it seems like not just the Mercedes customer teams, but all the teams, except bar probably Ferrari and Red Bull, are really struggling with braking and the braking performance, whether that is overheating, whether that is braking, locking up the tires because of the bumps and how stiff the car is. We saw Kevin Magnussen lock up a couple times. We saw, obviously, I think Hamilton and Russell lock up into turn one. And obviously, we know about McLaren struggling with their brakes and overheating and whatnot already. And, I think McLaren have a few other struggles going on too. And it's all adding up to their performance. But I believe that they have more pace than what we saw in Bahrain. And once they get on top of their struggles, whether that is brakes, PU deployment, or whatever that is, I think they'll be right up there with the Haas and the Alfa.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, McLaren better be on top of their performance and match Haas and Alpha, because after all these years, and after all the hopes they gave the fans in the last couple of years, to go back to 2015 performance and 2016 performance would be a great shame. But yeah,
I mean, I'm a Zach Brown fan, I'm a Lando Norris fan, I'm a Daniel Ricciardo fan, and I've loved to see
exactly.
the McLaren resurgence, right? And it's very heartbreaking for me too to see McLaren not up there with challenging Ferrari, Red Bull, and Mercedes. And to all the McLaren fans out there, as a Ferrari fan, I know how it feels. If you need a hug, we're right here. Although, as I say that, I remember how badly I treated my McLaren, a friend of mine who's a McLaren fan yesterday after Ferrari won. So it comes and goes, but if you need a hug, I'm here. But yeah, obviously we're excited. We're going to Saudi Arabia next week, and I think a couple other points from this weekend was it seemed that following was easier, but passing was tough because of the slipstream being not as effective. I think Russell pointed this out in during preseason testing, but I think the much bigger conversation for I think engineers and race strategists this after Bahrain will be that tires are more difficult to get warmed up, and this will play a part in strategy because now the strategists will have to, take into account the tire warm up time and their out lap time. And give it more weightage than they might have in the past. Now, obviously, we don't know what exactly the tools these F1 teams have and how they're calculating their pit stop times and when to pit and things like that. But it seems that the tire warm-up time might play a more crucial role than it had in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I saw Lewis Hamilton just sliding as he exited the pits, I was like,
Yeah, you don't see that every day.
yeah. I mean, it was very strange, and not the fact that okay, he has cold tires and he does not have the grip. The way he was sliding and the way he was struggling to find that sweet spot. So yeah, I think these are new tires. I think they'll take some time to get used to the drivers, because in testing they were not performing at the 100%. The fuel loads were vastly different. So in race pace especially, I think it's going to take some time to get on top of these struggles. But I think the one thing which we all were hoping to see in Bahrain has come true. The cars following each other is vastly improved than previous seasons. So I think that is like the main objective of the regulations has been achieved. That is a big win for Formula One. Talking about the reduced slipstream effect, even though it's not good to not see overtakes, and it's not good to just see cars following each other, but I think the added benefit of both.
You mean a straight line?
In straight lines. But I think the added benefit of the both added effects of both these situations, easier following and difficult overtaking, makes for more interesting racing.
It makes for great. Yep, absolutely.
Exactly. So
it makes for much better racing.
So if the slipstream effect was equal to last year, the overtaking would have been much easier under DRS. So it's going to be incredible racing this season and for the next coming 2-3 seasons.
Yep. The only thing that I'm disappointed about, which the rules, wanted to accomplish, was the fact to get the grid closer, and I don't think that has happened. I feel the grid spread is still about 2 seconds in qualifying between the top finisher and whoever's last. So that's a bit disappointing, but all we can hope for is that, with the offset in how much resources or times, CFD runs and things like that, that F1 has created based on finishing positions will help the teams converge much faster than in the previous generations.
Yes.
So along with the budget cap, obviously. So hopefully that'll work its charm. But overall, I am absolutely thrilled with the season opener, Vedant. Any last thoughts from you before we wrap up this podcast?
I mean, it's great that we have a double header to open the season. And Bahrain, even though it's a Middle Eastern track, it is not a stereotyped Middle Eastern track. It's one of the best tracks in Formula One, best circuits in Formula One calendar in the recent years. But going into Saudi Arabia, I think they are widening the circuit.
Yeah, they're making some changes to the tracks. Yeah,
to help these cars.
With visibility, yep.
But yeah, I think visibility is still an issue with these cars because of the larger tires and those winglets. So it's going to be very tough. And I think Esteban Ocon said that in his post-race interview. So it's going to be very interesting to see these cars go around in a street circuit. But yeah, I think Saudi Arabia, the Jeddah circuit in itself is the all these curves and the most number of corners in a circuit is going to be very interesting to watch in these new regulations, in these new
Yep.
new cars. Sorry.
New cars, yeah, it's okay. Yeah, and I think one last piece of news that came out was that Stefano Domenicali said that their F1 is looking at new venues, and the old historic venues do not have a place on the F1 calendar just because of their just because of the history that they have with F1. So it'll be interesting to see if F1 announces a few new venue deals over the course of the next year. But we'll see what happens. Vedant, one last prediction before we leave: who's going to win in Saudi Arabia?
I think Saudi Arabia, Max Verstappen will win.
Yeah, my money's on Red Bull too. So there we go. But thank you for joining me, Vedant. It's been a pleasure talking F1 with you. And obviously, we'll catch you on the next one.